All right, so here I am. I'm releasing another video. I want to go over something. I want to talk about the gold standard a little bit. You've heard me and Mr. Brando go over it a few times. Mr. Brando calls it the golden zombie apocalypse. It's pretty funny, but I think there's a lot of confusion. Many times when I've started to talk about the subject, people are interested in it, but of course during the show it gets cut off, and that there's a lot of information to be shared about the gold standard, and it's just too much to type. So I thought it just makes sense to make a video. So I'm going to explain to you what the gold standard is. Okay, so when people say the gold standard is a lop to your currency, that's not accurate. When they say there's not enough gold in the world to go back to the gold standard, that's not accurate, and I'll explain why. But before I do that, I went through and started. I actually subscribe to a website that covers all the central banks. It literally has news articles from what's going on with all central banks. And one common theme is they're constantly getting in trouble for scandals and corruption. So, but they get bailed out by our politicians who are bribed by these people. So let me show you some of the headlines. Look at this. Here's Iran. We know that their central bank was just recently burned down. Okay, over here, look at this. India's biggest ever bank scandal. Okay, corruption in Indonesia. Okay, come on, mouse, stop messing around. Sorry about that. So you look at Japan. Even in Japan, they have scandal. Turkey, scandal with their banks. And of course, we know about this one. Venezuela, their central bank really was a big part of the reason why their economy collapsed. And the reason for that is let's use the Federal Reserve as an example. Our Federal Reserve, people feel or think that the Federal Reserve is a government controlled entity. That's not true. It's actually privately owned. There's a group of families that own the Federal Reserve. They just use the word federal to make it look like the government is involved when in fact they're not. Here's the thing that drives me crazy about the Federal Reserve. The United States gave them the right and permission to print our money, and then they charge us interest for that. So that's like taking money from your right pocket, sticking it into your left pocket, and then charging yourself interest for the money that just went from one pocket to another. That's exactly what the Federal Reserve does. Now, Ron Paul, I'm sure, well, some of us are old enough to remember, Ron Paul had demanded on several occasions that the government be allowed to audit the books of the Federal Reserve because they're closed. Nobody knows how much money has been ever created, and we have no idea where the money went that they did have. So they're able to create money willy nilly, and we gave them the right to do that. And I'm going to explain to you how the gold standard keeps this from happening. All right. So I was trying to think of a way to best explain how the gold standard works, and I remember this story of the wolf, and I'm going to use this story to help kind of put it in layman's terms so it makes sense. Okay. So let's talk about the gold standard. But before we do, I want to talk about this gentleman here. This is Alan Greenspan. He once wrote an essay a while back explaining why and how important it is for the United States to stay in the gold standard. And here's one of the quotes from his article. It said, "In the absence of the gold standard, there is no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. There is no safe store of value." So basically, what these corrupt bankers, corrupt corporations, corrupt politicians do, they just tax you to death. And they just say it's because of the inflation. Well, again, we're taking money out of our right pocket, putting it into our left pocket, and then charging ourselves interest, and they're getting away with it. So it makes it really hard for people to store up any kind of wealth whatsoever unless you're already wealthy. It's easy to do. Okay, so let's get into the gold standard, and I'm going to tell you the story of the wolf. So here we go. The best way to explain how the gold standard works is by telling you the story of the wolf. So for those of you who are unaware, the wolf is an apex predator. What that means is the wolf is at the top of the food chain, Nothing hunts the wolf to eat it for food. The wolf is the alpha predator. The rabbit, the rabbit and the deer are just two animals that the wolf hunts in order to eat. So we're just going to keep this story simplistic, all right? Just for the sake of giving you this example. So both the deer and the rabbit, they eat vegetation, all right? They eat the veggies, they eat the greens, they eat the grass, they eat all kinds of vegetation is what they do. All right, so they do this to survive. That is their food source. Having stated that, let's get into the story. So pretend you live on a small island. There's no way to get food shipped to you. There's no way to get somewhere to get food. Let's just say, for the sake of simplicity, that you're on this island and you have the ability to grow a garden. Okay, so the only way for you to eat is to grow your own garden. If you don't grow your food, you die. So grow a garden. On the same island is the deer and the rabbit. Without any apex predator, the rabbit and the deer would quickly breed and multiply. They would then eat all the vegetation on the island, including your garden. This is devastating to your survival. You, the deer, and the rabbits would eventually die. What your island needs is a wolf. The wolf instinctively knows how much or little to eat in order to survive. And what I mean by that, people aren't aware of this. There's this built-in ability that wolves have. They can take a look at the territory that they control, and they know exactly the perfect balance that they need in their territory in order to survive. Not all animals have that. The wolves do. So if you had a wolf on your island, they would know, don't eat all the rabbits and don't eat all the deer. They know how to keep a perfect balance on the island so that everybody survives. So on your island, the wolf would be able to keep I just said that. The wolf would keep the deer and the rabbits from overpopulating, allowing vegetation to grow on the island. So basically what the wolf does, it regulates. It's saying, look, I know if there's 20 rabbits, I know the right amount should be 5. If there's, 30 deers, and I know the right amount should be 15. That population allows vegetation to grow. It allows them to be able to survive without them eating themselves to death and killing everybody else. That's what the wolf does. The job of the wolf is to keep the perfect balance for everyone to survive. Now you're going, well, what the heck's I got to do with the gold standard? Now I'm going to explain it to you. So the gold standard is the wolf. The deer and the rabbits are the greedy politicians, bankers, and corporations, all right? Just like on the island without the wolf, without the gold standard, the deers and the rabbits, who are the bankers, the corporations, and politicians, are allowed to do whatever they want and take huge risk with taxpayer dollars. This is why our national deficit is as large as it is. The fact that we can't monitor or audit our own Federal Reserve is really bad. We have no idea how much money has been actually produced. And because of that, we don't know the true value of our own dollar. They say, oh, it's a strong dollar. It's got strong purchasing power. But here's the thing. If you got a lot of dollars out there, it takes away from the value. It just thinks supply and demand. Okay? So what the gold standard does, the gold standard restricts the spending habits of our government, and by doing so, forces the politicians to do things that would benefit the American people. Stealing or funneling the money, in other words, being corrupt, would be much harder to do under the gold standard, okay? And the reason for that is this. You're only allowed X amount of money to spend, and that's based on the amount of gold that you hold, okay? So it's restrictive. It's restrictive in the budget, and this forces politicians to stay within the budget. This doesn't allow them to spend $2 million on the dancing habits of lesbians. You don't get to see the sexual breeding habits of, worms. Those types of things become non-important because you don't have that kind of money to waste. And one of the biggest ways to waste money is through appropriations. And what I mean by that is I live in a small town. They just put in 2 new signals. So what happens is our town tells our government we need X amount of dollars, millions of dollars, in order to take care of our budget. The government gives us that money. Towards the end of the year, if we have not spent all that money, you're forced to give that money back. And when you give them a new budget, they reduce it by the money that you didn't spend the year before. And that's how that works. So here's where appropriations come in. So that the government, or so that your little town doesn't lose that money, they'll go spend it on stupid shit. You know what I mean? Like we have two signals in a small town. It's made congestion. It's worse. It hasn't helped. But the point is, they needed to waste money so that they didn't have to give it back. And that's exactly what they did. Through the gold standard, that type of spending is restricted and harder to do, much harder to do. So there is a better management of our tax dollars. Okay? So, how does this work? How the gold standard works is those countries who participate in it, countries fix the value of their currencies against a specific weight of gold or against the currency of a country which did so. In other words, some countries are able to participate because they have a lot of gold. Other countries that don't have gold or don't have so much, what ends up happening is their currencies are then pegged to another currency, okay? It's pegged to one that's participating in the gold standard. So, domestic currencies were freely convertible into gold at the fixed price. There was no restrictions on the import or exports of gold. As each currency was fixed in terms of gold, exchange rates between the participating currencies were also fixed. I know what you're thinking. How does that affect the dong? How does that affect the dinar? Well, this is how I'm just kidding. I'm not going to tell you yet. You got to get to the end of the video. Okay? So, let's move on. Countries running trade deficit would experience gold overflows. Okay? Money supply would contract. So, in one sense, what Mr. B was talking about, you can't do away with the fiat currency. I don't think I've ever said that the fiat currency is going away. You still need the fiat currency to work with the gold standard. It's just that the difference between the two is this. A fiat currency is only backed by the promise of your government. In other words, the government says this is a $10 bill. It only has the value of a $10 bill because they told you so. So if something should happen, they're saying we promise you that we will honor the value of that currency. Well, no, they don't. That's a lie. Whenever we have a crash of any type, they hold the currencies or they keep us from getting to the currencies, and your value, your purchase value decreases as inflation goes up. Think supply and demand. Okay? So this gold standard changes that. So with the gold standard, the government can only produce as many dollars as it has in gold. Therefore, every dollar that's out floating around is secured by gold. Okay? So that's important. So your money literally has value. Right now, the fiat currency, the one under the Federal Reserve that says this is backed up by a promise, it's not worth anything. It's not even worth the paper that it's printed on. Many of you have probably ever seen a silver certificate. A silver certificate was a fiat currency that we had. Well, it was a currency that we had that was supported by silver. So at any time, you could take the dollar in, you can exchange it for a certain weight of silver. We also had gold certificates. You could take those in as well and then exchange them for the value of the gold. So the money actually had value to it, and it was supported by value. So you have to ask yourself, which do you prefer? Would you prefer the government give you a dollar bill that they say, yeah, we promised that it's worth $10? Or would you rather have a currency in which there's gold and or silver backing that value up? In other words, hey, if you want to exchange it, you get the wealth. This is important for the American people. Well, this is important for everybody. What this does, it actually, what the quote from Alan Greenspan now makes sense, because what he's saying is this: currency that is supported by gold and silver has value. That means it allows us to maintain our wealth. See, what the gold standard does is it drastically reduces inflation. As a matter of fact, it almost gets rid of it. And without inflation, that means our money has more buying power and it has real legitimate value. You actually accumulate wealth through the gold standard, okay? So it goes on, it says the global imbalances constrained by credit expansion in supply countries and contracts in deficit. So for those countries that are participating in the gold standard, have the gold to support their currencies, all right? For those countries that do not, there's an exchange of goods. So there's goods for gold, or there's goods for currency that's backed by gold. This is really good for those poorer countries, those countries that are poor, because basically now their currency has value, okay, through the gold standard of a bigger country, okay? So that's a good thing. That's really what we want. Trade balances were self-correcting. In other words, no one country could be higher than another. The gold standard restricts that. So it's limited leveraging and eliminates wanton discrepancy spending. So in other words, like I said, our governments can't just start, spending $10 million to see the sex habits of two turtles. Stupid crap like that. For those of you who are not aware how our system works, our politicians have found a way to funnel money, taxpayer monies, to themselves. Let me give you an example. So Planned Parenthood gets X amount of billions of dollars every year from taxpayers. It's to help fund their locations. And they'll tell you, oh, it's for women's rights. Yeah, it's for women's rights. That's what it's for. And it's for abortions. I get it. But what happens is we give them X amount of monies, and then you see them turn around and they funnel it. They donate money to campaigns of a lot of Democrats. I'm not just picking on the Democrats. So let me reword that. So all of a sudden you see Planned Parenthood donating money to politicians. Okay, that's funneling money. There's a ton of organizations out there that are like that. All right. So for those people who are or are not fans of Trump, Trump's been putting a halt to that kind of stuff. That's why he's doing away with Planned Parenthood. It has nothing to do with women's rights. The women still have the right. But what he's saying is, I'm cutting off all your corrupt ways of getting money to yourself. Okay, so that's what's really going on. Right here, what we're looking at is called the global reserve currencies. There is a pattern that happens. And what happens is a new type of monetary system comes out. It's actually what it is. It's just a test run. Test runs usually last about 80 years or so. The first one we did was in Portugal. It lasted 80 years, from 1450 to 1530. I don't want to go through all these, but you could just see what happens. So something major happens and it pushes everybody into this new monetary system. Then in 1640, you can literally go back to these dates. Go look at somewhere around 1530, you can see something dramatic happen that forced the masses into this new monetary system. You can go somewhere around 1640, do the research, and see another major type of collapse. Something happened and forced everybody into this new monetary system, all right? And that's the pattern that continues over and over and over. As you can see, we're at the end now of another monetary run. The fiat currency system is done with. It was a failed experiment. So people are not very good with change. So what happens is something dramatic will happen that will force us into this new change. All right, so looking here in 1920, I believe this was right at the end of the First World War, and we went into this new monetary system. All right, so something drastic always happens. If you look at all the corruptions that I pointed out for the CBI, what do you notice? What do you notice about all the banks? Corruptions galore. You see, this is not by coincidence. This is planned. Everything that we're seeing happen right now is planned. They intend to move us into a new monetary system, whatever it is. People think it's crypto, people think it's whatever. But here's what I'm going to say about cryptocurrencies. I believe there's a window of opportunity for people to benefit from it. But what drives me insane is when you hear people go, "Oh, Bitcoin is better than gold." No, it's not. Okay, it's not at all. Owning and holding physical gold and silver will always be better than cryptocurrencies. And let me show you why. Cryptocurrencies can be hacked. When there was a small crash happening with the cryptocurrencies, I went to go on Coinbase to cash out some of my coins. It literally kept making an excuse to not let me in to sell my coins. I don't like that kind of not being able to control it whenever I want. It literally went on for 10 days. I could not get into my account. I ended up benefiting from it because it rebounded and then gained. But the point is, I did not have immediate access to my cryptocurrencies when I needed it. If the power goes out, you can't get your cryptocurrency. God forbid, if something happens to the internet, you can't get to your cryptocurrencies. Do you see the difference? So, if you had $1 million and you were forced, someone put a gun to your head and said, you need to choose either take your $1 million and buy it in physical gold or buy cryptocurrencies. Well, which one are you going to pick? Exactly. That's why you hear me talk about all the time, I'm so hot on gold. And I am going to do a video on gold and silver, by the way. So let me show you why gold and silver is important. I'm going to show you what a debt clock looks like, okay? Give me 1 second. This is our national debt clock. You can go to it anywhere. What the national debt clock does is it gives us in real time the debt that we're accumulating. You can see all the numbers changing. It has all kinds of nifty things in here if you want to come in here, play around. That tells you the homelessness, healthcare costs, you know, medium income, the whole 9 yards. But let me show you something why I believe we're going into the gold standard. I'm going to show you two things. Down here on the bottom, you can see there's different choices. If you go to the AU, which is gold supply, you're going to see something really interesting. What we found out recently is China has been lying to us. They told us they only had 5,000 metric tons of gold. Then we find out they didn't. They have 27,000 metric tons of gold. India has 33,000 metric tons of gold. The United States only has 5,000 metric tons of gold. China and India both make up part of an organization called the BRIC. They're into the New Silk Road Initiative, all right? If you look at the two of them, they have more than all the other countries combined in gold. So, our dollar is the international reserve dollar. Because of that, we become a wealthy country off of that. But it also means that if somebody pisses us off, like China, well, then we could throw tariffs on you. We could stop you and we can hurt your economy. Okay? Tariffs has nothing to do with gold, but we can use them. So if they get away from the reserve dollars, people mix this up all the time. Petrodollar is not the same as a reserve dollar. They're two different things, okay? Petrodollars are how people trade and deal in oil, just oil. The international reserve dollar means when banks do business, one of the other currencies that they have are dollars, and we charge them to have that. So these people are tired of being prisoners to our system. So China has said it point blank out to the world. They're moving into the gold standard. With the amount of gold that they have, this would force every country to do the same thing that has gold. There would be no other option, and this is why. If they go into a gold-backed currency, back into the gold standard, that means all of their money can be exchanged for gold, okay? Or is supported by the value of gold. So if you go to us and we just have the fiat dollar and we don't have it, what happens? So countries are going to go, well, I don't want the US dollar anymore. It's just a piece of paper. I'd rather go to China and get their money because it actually is backed by real value. Let me show you something else for you people. I've said so many times, start stocking up on gold and silver. And let me show you why. This right here is a chart that's kept. And what this does is it shows you, when you see on the stock market, you see, well, gold's around 1400, silver's around 1600. That's paper value. Those prices are actually suppressed. That's not the real value. This gives you more of an idea of what the real value of gold and silver is. This is against our actual debt. Okay? So if we were to switch to the gold standard right today, that means that in order for us to cover the debt that we currently have, gold value would jump up to $8,678 per ounce. Okay? See right here, gold to dollar ratio. Silver, on the other hand, would jump up here to $1,044 per ounce. That's not too shabby, but let me let you in on a little secret. The debt that we're being told that we have is false. It's wrong. It's actually 3 or more times of what we're being told. So keep that in mind. If you want to get a true value of what these would be, multiplying times 3, because that would be the minimum value of gold and silver once the shit hits the fan with our economy. Okay, so let me go back to where we were. So I just explained this to you. This would be, this is how we determine it against our national debt. So here we go. Here's the big question. How does this affect the dinar and the dong? All right, let's get into it a little bit. To help illustrate the relationship between gold and foreign exchange trading, consider these 5 important features of yellow stuff. And they're talking about gold, of course. Okay. Until the gold standard was abandoned, countries couldn't supply or simply print their fiat currencies ad nauseum. The paper money had to be backed up by an equal amount of gold in the reserves. Then, as now, countries kept supplies of gold bullion on hand. Although the gold standard has fallen off, and it did in the 70s, and there's a chart that would blow your mind. If I find it, I'll bring it up on another lecture. You can see the huge gap in money that was created and inflation that took place once we got away. It's ridiculous, and it's why we are where we are with our national debt. Although the gold standard has long fallen out of the developed world, some economists feel we should return due to the volatility of the US dollar in other countries. We're seeing that everywhere. We see it everywhere. Look at the value of the China's yuan. They keep manipulating their currency. Okay, so that's not the true value of the currency. There's countries doing that everywhere. So the purchasing power of money everywhere is being reduced because they're just burdened with debt, is what it is. Okay, so going back to the gold standard would restrict that from happening again. Investors typically buy large quantities of gold when the country is expecting high levels of inflation. The demand of the gold increases during inflation times due to the inherent value and limited supplies. As it cannot be diluted, gold is able to retain value much better than any forms of currency, including cryptocurrencies. There's nothing supporting these things, all right? Just like the fiat currency, there's nothing supporting the paperwork other than a promise. Okay, so for an example, in 2011, investors feared declining value of the fiat currency and it drove the price of gold back up to 1,500. And what we see now, it's been there. That's because they know a worldwide market crash is coming. I can't emphasize this enough. And that is, you should start stacking gold and silver. People think, oh, I can't afford it. You don't have to buy a full ounce of gold. You could buy what's called fractionals, and I will go into those in another video, but let's just get past this here. So you look, it drove the value of gold up, okay? This indicates that there's a little confidence in the currencies in the world market. We see that happening now. The value of a nation's currency is strongly tied to the value of imports and exports. Okay, this is where you get your GDP from. This is where you get the trade value of your dollars. This is why China manipulates their currency and devalues it. So basically what happens is it's so cheap for you to purchase items or to even be in the labor force in China because they've lowered the value of the currency so low that people can't compete with them. Basically, what they're doing is enslaving their own people, is what they're doing. Okay. So, on the other hand, the value of the currency will increase when a country is in a net export. We see that. We are, China was a net exporter, but Trump put a hurt into that. Now we are becoming one of the largest exporters ourselves. We have a strong market, although I do think it's fake. And look at, we're gaining or reducing a lot of debt that we had to these other countries. As a matter of fact, China has been forced to sell recently huge amounts of their gold just to stay afloat. They're on the verge of collapsing. One of the people we really need to keep an eye on too, and I think what you're gonna see here in the next couple of months is Deutsche Bank is gonna file for bankruptcy. Once that happens, that will trigger a worldwide economical collapse. So those who have gold and silver will benefit, not freaking cryptocurrencies, all right? Okay. So in other words, an increase in the price of gold can create a trade surplus and help offset trade deficits. Conversely, countries that are large importers of gold will inevitably end up having to weaken their currency when the price of gold rises. Okay, for example, if a country that specializes in producing products made with gold but lack their own reserves would be a large importer of gold. And I'm going to talk about this because this makes a good point. I'm going to tell you why I think silver is going to be more valuable than gold. But anyways, let me get back to this. I'll do another video about this. So thus they will be particularly, good Lord, okay, the increase in the gold. Okay, anyways, yeah, I couldn't read that word. Let me put down my wine glass here. When central banks purchase gold, it affects the supply and demand of the domestic currency and may result in inflation. This is largely due to the fact that the banks rely on printing more money to buy gold and thereby create an excessive supply of fiat currency. This is what it was talking about, how it's self-correcting, all right? Now, I did say gold standard has very little to no inflation. There is a chart out there that will show you that it's never has ever been higher than 1.5%. Never, as long as we're in the gold standard. So do we get some inflation? Yes, you do. But it's very, 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 very low. And it's where we are now. It's killing us. Many people mistakenly use gold as a definitive proxy for valuing a country's currency, although there is undoubtedly a relationship between the gold price and the value of the fiat currency. It is not always an inverse relationship as many people assume. Okay, we talked about this all the time. There's not enough gold, or there's not enough, to cover everybody. So basically how it works, just so you guys know, countries agree on a set value of what gold will be. Okay? And so then where the fractional part, and not fractional banking, I'm talking about the fraction of your currencies. So let me give you an example. In 1911, they had decided that gold would be worth $20 an ounce. So $20 an ounce, whenever you had $1, it was worth 1/20th of weight of gold. You can go in and get 1/20th weight of gold for your dollar bill. Okay, this is what they're talking about in here. So there's a relationship between the gold and the fiat currency. But people go, oh, yeah, but what happens if everybody just cashes in and you use up all your gold? That's not going to happen. And that's because of our trades with other countries. There's this constant give and take of gold and or silver, okay? Gold has a profound impact on the value of world currencies. Even though the gold standard has been abandoned, gold as a commodity can act as a substitute for the fiat currency. Okay, this is important too because people go, oh, can you get rich off gold and silver? Well, the purpose of gold and silver is actually to protect your wealth, is what it does. Okay, so let me give you an example of this, and I've talked about this before. Okay, in 1911 or so, The value of a house was 3,500. You know what? I'm going to save that. Let me save that. I'm gonna do just like I'm doing now, a PowerPoint presentation, okay, and then show and explain it to you. So let me go back to where we are. So the dinar and dung. Here we go. Since all countries that agree on the gold standard set the value of the gold, this means that all participating companies or countries would have equal dollar for dollar value. Do you see what I'm saying? It would have to be equal. They're setting the value of the gold, and the dollars in increments are equivalent to other countries. So if, let's say, they say, oh, gold is going to be worth $100 an ounce, that means $1 is worth 1/100th of a piece of gold, but not just for us, also for other countries. Whatever their denominations are, whatever their currencies they use, it's still equal. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's a dollar for dollar. So what's this mean to the value of the US dollar? It will be the same value as the countries that are participating. So Iraq and Vietnam, if they moved into the gold standard with the US, this means the value of the dinar and the dong would be 1 for 1. That's right, 1 for 1. You would have equal value in money because it's equivalent to the equal value of its share of the gold. Okay, so again, let me just make this simplistic. Let's say gold is $10 an ounce. So $1 would be worth 1/10 in weight of gold. But that's here in the United States. Now, over in Iraq or in Vietnam, it would be the same thing. So if it's worth $10 in value, then whatever their dollar is would be equal to 1/10 the value of gold. So closing, here's what I gotta say. Worldwide, we're seeing the issues with central banks. Again, I don't think this is a coincidence at all. I think this is planned. This is how they move the masses from one system to the next. Now, do I think we're going to move into the gold standard? I've said about it. I've teased about it. I believe it's possible. As a matter of fact, there's every indication that this is going to happen. Trump is a huge fan of the gold standard, and every time he appoints a new person to the Federal Reserve, the people that he appoints are those individuals who support his idea of moving us back to the gold standard. China has threatened to move into the gold standard. So has Iran, Japan. There's more than one country moving in that direction. You can literally go in there and Google and look at the people moving into gold back or gold standard for their currency. So all it takes is one of these countries, these bigger countries like China, like we see India, or even the United States. Any one of those bigger countries makes that move, we all go. There's no avoiding it because people are going to want the currency of the individuals that have the gold. So this is why I'm saying this is why I think we're going back there. Now, having said that, I think our time is growing short. And I'll explain that to you guys in another video. In the next video, I'm going to go on and explain how to and why you should collect gold and silver, where to go for that, and how to store it, how to protect it, and the differences between what it is that you're looking at, like coins, rounds, and bars. Okay? All right. Nice talking to you again. I look forward to doing another video later on. Bye-bye.